Paul Heyman asks Brock Lesnar to lead the Vision after betraying Seth Rollins on WWE Raw. Paul Heyman just orchestrated the most ruthless and calculated betrayal in WWE history by abandoning Seth Rollins at the worst possible moment and offering Brock Lesnar the leadership of the Vision faction in a move so shocking and so strategically devastating that it's completely rewritten the entire power structure of Monday Night Raw and left Seth Rollins more isolated and vulnerable than he's been in his entire career. But what makes this betrayal infinitely worse than a simple alliance switch is why Heyman did it, when he chose to strike, and the cold-blooded speech he delivered to Seth explaining exactly why the architect was never actually the leader Paul believed in. He was just a placeholder keeping the position warm until the real beast could be convinced to take control. But here's what's going to absolutely infuriate you and spark the most controversial debate in wrestling. Paul Heyman didn't betray Seth because Brock offered him more money or better positioning. He betrayed Seth because after months of working closely with the architect, Heyman concluded that Seth fundamentally lacks the killer instinct and the willingness to do whatever it takes that's necessary to truly dominate WWE. And the specific examples Paul cited of Seth's weakness and outdated morality are actually things that most fans consider Seth's best qualities: his loyalty to his teammates, his reluctance to seriously injure opponents, and his belief that winning should come through superior ability rather than pure ruthlessness. Paul Heyman essentially told Seth that being a good person makes you a bad leader, and then proved it by recruiting the most brutal and amoral force in WWE to replace him. The most disturbing part is how Heyman presented this betrayal to Brock Lesnar as an opportunity to lead something meaningful rather than just destroy everything like he usually does. According to sources who were present during their private meeting, Paul didn't pitch Brock on being another member of the Vision, he pitched Brock on completely reshaping the Vision into the most dominant and terrifying faction WWE has ever seen by removing all the rules, all the morality, and all the hesitation that held Seth back from achieving true dominance. Paul essentially told Brock that he could take everything Seth built and turn it into a weapon of mass destruction, and all Brock had to do was acknowledge that Paul Heyman's counsel was more valuable than Seth Rollins' leadership ever was. And Brock's response to Paul's offer is what has everyone questioning whether we're about to witness the most dangerous and unstable alliance in wrestling history or the beginning of a masterpiece of strategic dominance that will make Roman Reigns' bloodline look like a friendly social club. The Beast incarnate didn't immediately accept Paul's offer. He made demands, he set conditions, and he made it brutally clear that if he's leading the Vision, it will be unrecognizable from what Seth created because Brock Lesnar doesn't believe in visions or long-term plans or team unity. Brock believes in violence, domination, and ensuring that everyone in WWE understands that opposing him has only one outcome: complete destruction. The question that should terrify every WWE superstar is this: if Paul Heyman can betray Seth Rollins, someone he worked with for months and helped build into a faction leader, because he decided Seth wasn't ruthless enough, what's stopping Paul from betraying Brock Lesnar the moment the Beast shows any sign of being less than the perfect instrument of destruction Paul needs him to be? Let me tell you exactly how this shocking betrayal went down, what Paul said to Brock during their secret negotiations, and what this means for Seth Rollins' future in WWE's immediate landscape. The betrayal happened during Monday Night Raw's main event segment where the Vision was supposed to be addressing their ongoing war with a rival faction. Seth Rollins had assembled the entire group in the ring, preparing to deliver a strategic speech about their next moves and their plans for dominance. Paul Heyman was standing beside Seth as he'd done for months, serving as the architect's advocate and helping articulate the faction's vision and goals. Seth began his speech with confidence, outlining how the Vision had been systematically taking control of Raw's main event scene and positioning themselves as the future of WWE. He talked about their collective strength, their shared goals, and their commitment to changing WWE through superior strategy and unified purpose. The crowd was engaged, and everything seemed to be building toward an important announcement or challenge. Then Paul Heyman stepped forward and asked for the microphone, and something in his demeanor immediately signaled that what was about to happen wasn't part of the planned segment. Seth looked confused but handed over the mic, clearly expecting Paul to deliver one of his signature speeches hyping the Vision and building excitement for their next move. What Paul said instead was devastating in its honesty and its complete destruction of everything Seth thought they'd built together. "Seth Rollins, we need to talk," Paul began, his voice carrying that distinctive tone that always signals something significant is coming. "We need to talk about leadership, about what it actually takes to dominate WWE, and about why the Vision, as you've been leading it, is fundamentally flawed and destined to fall short of the dominance it could achieve with the right person in charge." Seth's expression shifted from confusion to concern as he realized this wasn't going to be a supportive speech. The other members of the Vision looked equally uncomfortable, unsure what was happening. Paul continued, "For months, I've stood beside you and advocated for your vision. I've helped you recruit members, strategize attacks, and position this faction as a dominant force. I've used my considerable skills and decades of experience to elevate everything you've tried to accomplish. But throughout all of that work, I've been observing something troubling, something that's become impossible to ignore and impossible to justify continuing to enable." Paul's voice grew more intense. "You don't have what it takes to lead the Vision to its ultimate potential. You're talented, you're intelligent, you're charismatic, but you're fundamentally limited by outdated concepts of honor, fairness, and restraint that prevent you from making the hard decisions that true dominance requires. Every time we've had an opportunity to completely destroy an opponent, you've held back. Every time we could have exploited a weakness to guarantee victory, you've insisted on winning the right way. Every time your teammates have been willing to cross lines that would ensure our dominance, you've reined them in because you're more concerned with being respected than being feared. Seth tried to interrupt, to defend his leadership philosophy, but Paul silenced him with a raised hand. I'm not finished. Because here's what you need to understand, Seth, I didn't come to WWE to help build another faction that's pretty good or very successful or really impressive. I came to WWE to find someone capable of absolute dominance, someone who could surpass even what Roman Reigns accomplished with the Bloodline, someone who could make WWE acknowledge them not through respect or admiration but through pure, undeniable power that makes resistance futile. Paul's next words were delivered with brutal finality, and Seth, you're not that person. You never were. I thought maybe I could shape you into that person, that maybe your intelligence and abilities could overcome your moral limitations. But I was wrong. You're too concerned with legacy and how history will judge you. You're too invested in being seen as a hero or at least as someone who won fairly. You want dominance, but you want it on your terms, with rules and boundaries that make you feel good about yourself. And that weakness makes you unsuitable to lead the vision to where it needs to go. The arena was absolutely silent, everyone processing the magnitude of what Paul Heyman was saying. The other members of the Vision were looking at each other, clearly uncertain about where this was going and whether they should intervene. Then Paul delivered the coup de grace, which is why I've been in negotiations with someone who doesn't share your limitations, someone who understands that dominance requires ruthlessness, someone who's proven throughout their entire career that they're willing to do whatever it takes to destroy anyone who stands in their way. I've been speaking with Brock Lesnar about taking over leadership of the Vision and transforming it into what it should have been from the beginning, not a faction built on shared vision and collective goals, but a weapon of pure destruction led by the most dangerous man in WWE history. The crowd erupted as the implications became clear. Seth looked absolutely devastated, a mixture of shock, betrayal, and hurt crossing his face. The other Vision members were equally stunned, processing that their advocate had just publicly declared their leader inadequate and announced he was recruiting Brock Lesnar to replace him. Paul wasn't finished. Brock Lesnar doesn't care about your vision, Seth. He doesn't care about long-term planning or faction unity or any of the things you think are important. What Brock cares about is destroying everything in his path and ensuring that everyone in WWE understands that opposing him is a death sentence for your career. And that's exactly what the Vision needs, not another talented wrestler playing at being a faction leader, but a legitimate monster who makes people terrified to even be booked against him. Before Seth could respond, Brock Lesnar's music hit, and the Beast Incarnate appeared at the top of the ramp. He walked slowly to the ring, and the menace in his approach was palpable. This wasn't a celebratory debut, this was a predator entering territory he'd already decided to claim. Brock entered the ring and stood face to face with Seth while Paul positioned himself between them. The contrast was striking. Seth, who'd been built up as a master strategist and brilliant leader, suddenly looked small and vulnerable standing across from the raw physical dominance and barely contained violence that Brock represented. Paul addressed Seth one final time. I want to be clear about something, this isn't personal. You're a tremendous talent, and you'll have a successful career. But the Vision needs someone who's willing to burn WWE to the ground to prove dominance, and that's never going to be you. You're too good a person to be a truly great leader, and that's your fundamental flaw. Then Paul turned to Brock. And you, Brock, I'm offering you the opportunity to lead the most talented group of wrestlers on Raw, to reshape them into an extension of your will, and to dominate WWE in ways that even your previous accomplishments couldn't match. But I need to know, are you willing to actually lead these people, or do you just want to destroy everything like you usually do? Brock's response was chilling in its simplicity. I don't lead. I don't inspire. I don't care about unity or shared goals or any of that garbage. What I do is destroy anyone you point me at, and everyone who follows me either keeps up or gets left behind. You want the Vision to be dominant? Fine. Point me at whoever's in the way, and I'll remove them. Point me at whoever thinks they can challenge us, and I'll end their career. But don't expect me to give motivational speeches or care about anyone's feelings or play these stupid faction politics games. I'm here to hurt people, and anyone who's smart will get behind me and anyone who's stupid will get in front of me. Paul smiled. That's exactly the attitude that will make the Vision truly dominant. Welcome to your new role, Brock. The Vision dies today, and something far more dangerous is born. The other members of the Vision had to make an immediate choice: stay loyal to Seth or acknowledge Brock as their new leader. The faction split, with some members immediately moving to stand with Brock while others stayed beside Seth, creating a clear divide that promised future chaos and conflict. Seth, feeling betrayed and humiliated, tried to challenge Brock immediately, but the Beast destroyed him with an F5 so brutal that medical personnel had to check on Seth before he could be helped to the back. Paul Heyman watched impassively, showing no remorse for what he'd done to someone he'd worked with for months. The aftermath has been absolutely catastrophic for Seth and transformative for WWE's power structure. Seth has been left without his advocate, without some of his faction members, and with his leadership questioned publicly by one of wrestling's most respected minds. Multiple wrestlers who'd been considering joining the division have now backed away, not wanting to align with a group whose stability has been so thoroughly destroyed. Brock, meanwhile, has immediately begun reshaping what's left of the division into something unrecognizable, eliminating rules, encouraging ruthless tactics, and making it clear that anyone who can't keep up with his intensity will be removed. The faction that Seth built on strategy and collective purpose is becoming a weapon of pure destruction centered entirely on Brock's whims. Paul Heyman is thriving in his new role as Brock's advocate and the Vision's strategic architect, showing absolutely no regret about betraying Seth. In interviews, Paul has doubled down on his assessment that Seth lacked the ruthlessness necessary for true dominance and that recruiting Brock was the only logical evolution for a faction that wanted to actually control WWE rather than just compete at a high level. Now here's the question that's going to determine whose side you're on. Was Paul Heyman right that Seth Rollins' moral code and reluctance to be completely ruthless made him unsuitable to lead a dominant faction, or did Paul betray something valuable by abandoning the principles that made the Vision different from other factions? Your answer reveals whether you believe dominance requires moral compromise or if sustainable success comes from maintaining principles even when ruthlessness might offer short-term advantages. Here's the even more controversial question: will Brock Lesnar's leadership of the Vision be more effective than Seth's because of his ruthlessness and willingness to do whatever it takes, or will the lack of strategy and long-term thinking ultimately cause the faction to implode? Because there's a legitimate argument that pure destructive power led by someone like Brock might achieve more immediate dominance than strategic planning led by someone trying to maintain moral boundaries. But there's also a strong case that factions need more than just violence to sustain long-term success. Tell me in the comments, if you were a member of the Vision, would you stay loyal to Seth Rollins and his vision, or would you align with Brock Lesnar and Paul Heyman for the promise of more dominant success? And here's what I really want to know: how long before Paul Heyman betrays Brock Lesnar for someone even more ruthless, and who could possibly be more dangerous than the Beast incarnate? Paul Heyman asking Brock Lesnar to lead the Vision after betraying Seth Rollins on WWE Raw wasn't just a shocking alliance change, it was a philosophical statement about what Paul believes leadership requires and a brutal assessment that Seth's best qualities as a person made him unsuitable for the level of dominance Paul wanted to achieve. The betrayal exposed the fundamental tension in wrestling between being respected and being feared, between winning through excellence and winning through intimidation, between building something sustainable and destroying everything in your path. Paul chose fear, intimidation, and destruction by recruiting Brock, and Seth was left to question whether his approach to leadership was actually a weakness. What happens next will determine whether Paul's assessment was correct or whether the chaos and instability that comes with Brock's leadership ultimately proves that there's value in Seth's more principled approach. But regardless of outcome, Seth Rollins has learned the hardest possible lesson: in Paul Heyman's world, being a good person is a liability that prevents you from achieving the dominance that ruthless monsters like Brock Lesnar can deliver.